Just a quick word before your podcast starts to let you know that Behind the Goals with me, Rachel Corsey and Leanne Crichton is now available every Tuesday. Make sure you tune in each week for all things women's football and plenty of special guests. Just search Behind the Goals on BBC Sounds.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast with me, David Currie, and BBC commentator Liam McLeod. It's the first of our Premiership preview editions. There will be 12 of the beauties, one for each club, and we start the ball rolling with freshly promoted Dundee. And with that in mind, our special guest today is Dark Blues diehard Danny Smith. Danny, welcome to the podcast. Now be honest, will you miss the Championship, the Friday night football, the free-to-air live games, Al Lamont's commentary, and not having to worry about relegation?
Yeah, certainly going to miss the Friday night TV. That's a big one. That's fantastic, that. Sometimes I think I'm a little bit jealous of the other teams then. I realise that when the Premier and tell myself to stop kidding myself.
Tell you what, Liam, Danny will agree with this, but it's never dull being a Dundee fan. You win the Championship and then the manager gets the heave-ho shortly afterwards.
Yeah, the Dundee fans, I think, would like a little bit of stability, preferably for them in the top flight. They've been up and down too often over the last 20 years. I think I look back, I think it's 11 of the last 20 seasons have been in the second tier, 9 in the top flight. What I would say is that I think they're, from me personally, looking at it, I think there's some decent times ahead for Dundee. I really like the appointment of Tony Docherty. He's obviously getting the chance to go out on his own now, and I think he'll do a really good job there. He knows the city, knows it really well, and I think the Dundee supporters are pretty excited about what's ahead, I would have thought.
Are you excited, Danny?
Yeah, I am. I really am. Initially, when Gary Boyer was let go, the beer wasn't even flat from the celebrations of winning the league. And then we've also had what seems like an annual manager hunt that doesn't go the way that we expect. But the appointment of Tony Docherty, I wasn't expecting it, but I'm fairly behind it, especially when you look at the pedigree behind him and being Derek McInnes's assistant for so long, and then obviously some of the signings he's made. It's certainly got a lot of Dundee fans forgetting about Boyer's dismissal and looking forward to next season.
So what are you expecting from him? Are you expecting him to be cast in the same mould as Derek McInnes, same sort of tactics?
Aye, yeah, to an extent, and even seen some of the games, friendlies, and even the game against Bonnie Rigg just there. It's like he's trying to mould the young players and attacking as well. It looks solid at the back, and it just looks like we're a couple of players away from up top of being a really good attacking side. It's not often you see Dundee fans talking like this, but yeah, we feel like we've got something good on the go here, even despite this being Tony's first season as a manager.
Hi, Liam. You get that kind of number 2 syndrome, though, don't you? Sometimes when people step out of the shadow of their old gaffer and they go it alone, sometimes it works, sometimes it just doesn't come off.
Yeah, but I mean, I've always liked the cut of Tony Doc's jib. I think he knows what he's doing. He was a really trusted lieutenant for Derek McInnes for those years, particularly in their time at Aberdeen, where they did enjoy some decent success. And Danny's right. I mean, the squad that he's moulding there is more than good enough to hold its own in the top flight of in this country. I like the signing of Joe Shaughnessy. He's a player Tony knows really well from his time at Pittodrie. I think he'll do a good job in there. And Lee Ashcroft certainly played beside him against Bonnie Rigg. They forced lots of chances. Goalkeepers made a good few saves in that one. But when you look at the other signings, Zach Robinson, they know what he can do. They know what he brings to the table. Scott Tiffany, real live wire player. I think they'll be very excited with him, and with Luke McCowan there as well. They're both very direct, I think. And I would expect Zach Rudden to finally show us what he can do in the top flight. He's got all the tools to be able to be a really important player. And Max Anderson, another one who's come through the ranks there. It's important that they've been able to hold on to him. So yeah, and it'd obviously be really interesting to see how Charlie Riley does, Danny, I would have thought.
Yeah, that's one hot prospect for Dundee. We've yet to see him in the pre-season games, but it's a player that, I mean, I know Albion Rovers struggled and I think they were relegated, but he wasn't getting put forward for Player of the Year for no reason at all. Looking at some of his highlights as well, he looks like a bit of a free kick specialist, and it's just a player that, yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting him to be in the team and boss in the midfield from day one, but I fully expect him to come good within his time at Dens.
Some interesting comings and goings at Dens Park. You mentioned some of them. Neither of you gents have mentioned the boys they're bringing in from, I was going to say South America, but of course Mexico's in North America, isn't it? You've got Portales. I think that's the correct pronunciation. Liam will pull me up on it if it's not. Old school defender and a striker, Pineda.
It'll be very interesting to see them as well, isn't it? The reason we've not mentioned them really is because they are unknown quantities. I don't think there'll be many D fans who've clapped eyes on these guys before. I'm sure they've been on the internet online and they've seen a highlights reel or two. But yeah, I mean, those two coming in, they've obviously got something about them. I think Derek and Tony's success rate in the transfer market, if they got it right, they tended to get it very right. And if these two have got something about them as well, then they'll be good additions to the Dundee squad, I would have thought.
Aye, how do you think he's going to play it, Tony Docherty, tactics wise, Liam?
I'll tell you what he'll do. If he does what Derek does, if they can get into the lead, then there's every chance they're going to emerge with a clean sheet and a victory. That's how they tended to work things, particularly up in Aberdeen. They had a more difficult season with Kilmarnock last term, but you can understand that given they were just back up in the top flight. I think Killie would have settled for 10th. If you'd offered it to them at the start of last season, they'd have taken it, and that's where they ended up finishing, away from any kind of relegation issues. So they were always very structured in what they did. They always tended to have a strong defence, and I'm not so sure if they'll play in the counter attack. But I'll tell you, Danny, they've got plenty of pace in that squad to be able to play that way if they want to.
Yeah, especially like you've mentioned, Luke McCowan's name. It's a player that he's got better. He kind of found himself out the team last season, but then he found his way back in it, and he's got the ability in him to take on players, and it looks like he's kind of fulfilling his potential. And you've also got another young player, Lyle Cameron, who was outstanding for us last term. He's kind of got everything, and apart from the height. That's probably the only thing that would let him down, but he doesn't let that bother him at all. But yeah, we've got pace all over that team. Josh Mulligan as well, another one who can play right back and get up and down that wing, no problem. I think the young players that we've got and how energetic they are will cause teams problems this term.
Mulligan was one who I thought, even though Dundee had a terrible time of it 2 seasons ago when they were relegated, I thought that Mulligan actually looked pretty good when he was in the side. And they've got a few youth academy graduates that have broken through into the side, and one who did so a heck of a long time ago now, and he's a big Dundee fan, Cammy Kerr, who I think is always an important player, no matter who the Dundee manager is.
Yeah, Cammy Kerr, he's a player that you want in that dressing room. He's Dundee through and through, and as someone's testimonial season now, he's probably be that Dundee that long that he'll have two. I think that's the type of characters as well that you need in the dressing room to remind players who they're playing for, and doing it for the fans. You can put players in there with probably better ability than Cammy Kerr, but I don't think you'll get players that will get through to new players coming in, just what it means to play for Dundee.
Liam, you mentioned there Dundee have been they've been a yo-yo club, haven't they? Is it just all about survival this season, plain and simple?
Look, see, since I started working in this job, this industry, which was back in 2000, when you look at the Dundee team from that year, so that's 23 years ago, which I can't quite believe, but anyway. And you look at the superstars they had, they obviously ran into financial problems after that. They've been up and down. I mean, it must be fairly stressful to be a Dundee fan, I would have thought. but they're in a good place right now. I'm sure that that's nothing to do with whatsoever the demise of their neighbours over the last few months. But yeah, I mean, I think that we're looking at a club here that, and I was talking about a couple of other clubs in the Premiership that's potentially been dark horses this season. Dundee, when you look at that squad, and if it works for Tony Docherty, then they could be looking up the way rather than looking over their shoulder. And as I said there, it's been such a stressful time for Dundee over the last couple of decades. When you look at the season 2 years ago, when obviously James McPake's in charge, takes them up. I think it took them until about the 9th week before they managed to get a victory, and they didn't ever really recover from that. And then they string 2 wins together. James McPake's emptied. They bring Mark McGee in, and they only won 1 game after that. What they want is a nice stress-free season, a bit of consolidation. And I think similarly to Kilmarnock last term, they would probably openly admit to 10th being fine.
Danny, 10th fine for you?
I think so. I think I would take 10th right now. I was speaking about stress-free seasons with Dundee. I'm 39 years old, and I don't think I've ever had one at Dens. No, even when we're doing good, we find something to totally turn the head on it. So, I think it's all about this season is to consolidate our place in the league, hopefully not be in any relegation trouble with a couple of games to go, and we take it from there. And you mentioned as well about the kind of way United done their season, and it's another opportunity that Dundee have got in the space of just say like 7 years to implement themselves as the big team in the city. We're kind of binned it last time, and this time we've kind of got to grab this opportunity with both hands and just to keep ascending up and prove that we can be a Premiership club.
Is there a wee part of you that's a wee bit disappointed United aren't in the top division this year?
There is. You know what? I'm married to a United fan, so we get a good kind of banter with that. But I do miss the derbies. When we've won, coming home and kind of having the banter with her. But it is. I have family, United fans. Mine's a Dundee, so it's never anything vicious. The Dundee derby is a cracking derby. There's hardly any trouble, if any trouble at all.
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, but you always get great games. We've been on a receiving end a couple of humpings in the past few seasons, but there have been generally good games. I think there's been 1-0 in the past 10 years. So, I mean, it is a big loss, but I mean, don't get me wrong, us Dundee fans were absolutely loving it that we went up and they went down on the same season. So, I mean, if I can maybe give it one season, and if they want to come up to join us, they can. You
mentioned that the stressful nature of being a Dundee fan there. I'm just... How strong is the fans' support for the regime at Dens? I think Tim Keyes has been the owner for about a decade now. The only constant seems to be change. They bin managers with stunning rapidity. I think you've had 8 in that 10-year period, and there's endless chat about the new stadium.
I back the current owners and the regime, but there's also we've got a core of the support that want answers. There's they've got to be more open with the fans. They don't really engage with the fans. There's no AGM meetings, so it just seemed to be kind of a closed book. And the stadium as well. You keep hearing planning permissions going in this month, and then it's put back to that month, and next thing you know, there's a year down the line. So there doesn't really seem to be much happening on that way.
Do you want them to move into a new stadium, Danny?
Personally, I mean, I love Dens, but it is past its day. It's getting run down now. Don't get me wrong, if they were able to build a whole new Dens Park on place where we are, then I would be for that. But I think they're looking at different reasons to move. Easier to get fans in and out the city. I think they'll only be coming in so many miles into the city, and then they'll be back out again. So, I wouldn't mind a big brand new shiny stadium, but it will be a heavy heart when and if we do leave Dens Park.
I suppose, Liam, you can say what you like about the owners and supporters do, but they have stayed the course, and he's not been shy putting his hand in his pocket.
No,
sorry, Liam.
No, you crack on. Was that to me, David, or was that to Danny?
It was intended for you, but I don't mind who answers it.
No, it's okay. So I'll have a little go at it first.
Liam, I'll let you go. It's okay. Yeah.
All right.
You're too nice, a pair of you.
I know. It's an Aberdonian and a Dundonian getting on well there. Did you see that?
Oh,
Yeah, no, I used to love the away days down to Centenary Bar, then down to either one of the stadiums. Anyway, yeah, look, no, there's no question that there's been money spent there, but has it been spent the right way? When you look at the recent history, it suggests it hasn't been always spent in the right way. But I think there's factors in Dundee's troubles over the last 10, 15 years. For example, in 2012, when they were ready for championship football, Barry Smith's getting a squad ready for the championship. And then they obviously had promotion foisted upon them because of what was going on at Rangers. And, they didn't ever take to that because the squad wasn't being ready for top flight football. But obviously Tim Keyes has come in. They did have a fairly lengthy stay in the top flight. I think, Danny, was it 5 years you managed relatively recently? You managed to string 4 or 5 seasons together. It's about getting into that division and staying there. And I think a real source of frustration for Dundee supporters will have been the cups, I would have thought, over the last while. That you don't tend to see Dundee in the latter stages of either cup competition. And I suppose whilst league consolidation's a big issue for them, and it's something that Tim Keyes will be desperate for, and maybe even look at the top 6 if everything clicks. Getting back to Hampden's got to be a real priority for the Dundee supporters, Danny. Would that be fair?
Yeah. I think the cup's always a frustration. My time being a Dundee fan, it's only 2 cup finals, one against Rangers and the Scottish Cup, the other against Aberdeen back in '95. And there's been maybe 2 trips in the semi-final. That's I've probably been to Hampden more to see a band play than I have to see Dundee.
But that is, I mean, I don't like using the term, but for a so-called provincial club, I think everyone is, for some reason, is put under that umbrella out with Celtic and Rangers. For these clubs, getting to Hampden is, getting to the latter stages of these competitions is the realistic chance to lift silverware. And Dundee have a rich history with regards to winning trophies. A long time ago now, obviously. And it's the same for a good few other clubs. But when that is your realistic shot at winning a competition, then that's where the priority lies for supporters. And that's why these League Cup group matches that most of the clubs are taking part in just now are so important. United have had a dreadful start to theirs. This is your realistic shot at lifting silverware, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. We always just seem to do that in the League Cup. We do well. I think there's only been once that we've not came through the group stages, but we always seem to do really well. And then it gets to maybe the quarter-final stage and we get hit with Rangers or Celtic, and that's the end of that. But it certainly is the League Cup, Scottish Cup. As what I look at each season as the realistic target is get to the semi-final at least. Final would be a bonus. And if you win it, then, well, that's you. That's me set for life, to be honest. But it never works out that way. I don't know what it is. There must be some sort of hoodoo placed against Dundee, especially with our Scottish Cup record. We'll get reminded about that enough from Labour's. But it's got to be that's what's got to be the aim every season, especially being in the Premiership now, is to be looking at to win a cup. That is it. Let's see which one we can get through to the final. And I think looking at it, it would probably be the League Cup that we'll look at, especially when you've got teams playing in Europe so early that they might take their eye off the ball there. So League Cup for me as well.
You mentioned realistic targets there when you were speaking, Danny, and I was reading the comments. I think it was his valedictory speech, Gary Boyer, after he'd get the sack, or he parted company with Dundee, and he said top 6 was possible.
Well, it always is. I remember sitting around going up and Tony Fitzpatrick kept giving out was it top 4 chat quite a lot, and everybody kind of thought that was unrealistic, and they're kind of building themselves up just now. But top 6, it's got to be the aim as well. When you're in the Premiership, you should always be looking at where you're going to finish in the bottom 6. It's always got to be, we've got to make the top 6. That's what we've got to be fighting for. And as much as we've moved on from Gary Boyer, and I feel like we've probably improved on that. I know that we've not seen him, Tony Dockett, in a league match as manager, but just with the way he's played, it's different to Boyer, and I feel like we would have much of a realistic chance getting to the top 6 with Tony in charge.
Right, Liam, I'm going to put both of you on the spot. I know, Liam, you'll try and kind of meander around this, but I'm going to ask you, where are Dundee going to finish in the league table this season? You first, Danny.
me, well, 10th would be, I would go with 10th, but you know what, I'm going to go out there and say that we'll finish a lofty 8th.
8th position, says Danny, the dark blue diehard. Liam?
Yeah, I think they'll have a good season. I think they need to add another couple. And I'm sure they'll be working on that before the end of August. But I genuinely fancy Dundee have a really good campaign. Like I say, if they can get off to a good start, then they can build from there. But I think I can really see them having a good campaign, and it could be kind of upper reaches of the bottom 6. They might even be knocking on the door of the top 6. And I think it's pretty well accepted that the Dundee home top is one of the best, if not the best, for the new season. I'm sure Danny's got it somewhere. I'm sure he's purchased the home and away ones.
Yeah, you can get the home one that looks fantastic, and you can also get a museum one, so you've not got the sponsor, because that's went up in the V&A Museum at the waterfront, because it's tartan one for something like that. But yeah, they're absolutely fantastic shirts. But I think somebody pointed out Dundee have got a tendency to get relegated when we have got an absolutely topper of a top. So hopefully we can maybe not do that this season.
All right, gents, thank you so much for your thoughts. Liam McLeod, BBC commentator, and Dundee fan Danny Smith. And thanks to you for listening to this edition of the Scottish Football Podcast Premiership Preview.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Radio Scotland.